All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for waiting. So sorry we are a few minutes late, but hope everyone's having a lovely Wednesday so far. I am Emily. I'm the community manager at Designlab. Like totally forgot my title there. And today I have Nicole. Nicole,
Hello.
introduce yourself.
Hi. My name is Nicole Locklair. I manage career services and recruiting here at Designlab.
Woohoo! Awesome. So, as the webinar title says, right, career services at Designlab. So really today is going to be a little bit of a mix of everything. So it's going to be a little bit of an info session, a little bit of a Q&A, and, if we get some time, we can chat through some things related to career services, but really, hopefully everyone kind of walks away with better understanding of what career services is here at Designlab. So yes, everyone's already super active in the chat. Love it. Everyone has clearly been here. So that's amazing. If you haven't, welcome. Thank you for attending your first Designlab webinar. Say hello in the chat, share your LinkedIn, all the fun stuff that you would like to share. Let us know where you're from. We love seeing when folks are like, I'm from this part of the world, because we're on this side of the world. So that's awesome. If you have any questions, please post them in the questions tab. I believe it's at the bottom right corner of your screen. And maybe as we go along, we may set up some polls, but for now, questions go in there. And then when we get to Q&A, or if we kind of slot them in based on what we're talking about, we'll answer your questions as best we can. All right, so we're going to get started. Nicole, so career services, right? So it's this like part of Designlab, UX Academy that no one really knows or like has a lot of like concrete information about. So in your words, how do you describe career services? What does it do?
Yeah, so career services, I'll start from like the technicals and then we can get into the more like aspirational parts of career services. But career services comes at the end of your experience in UX Academy. So students will sign up for UX Academy, go through two phases, phase 1 and phase 2, and then they are launched into career services. Career services is kind of like phase 3, if you want to think about it that way. It is not required. We don't make you do it, but I think like 99% of our graduates will go into career services. So career services lasts for up to 6 months-ish, 26 weeks. And we pair you with a career coach. And the career coaches are either recruiters, kind of like my background. So before this, I was a recruiter at design companies and agencies, product design companies, or they are hiring managers who are designers. So kind of like our mentors, but they need additional years of experience in hiring people and managing people so they can help you through the interview process. There is a light curriculum in career services. And when I say light, I mean it's more sort of directional. So we have students who have never written a resume before. That's fine. We have articles and tips and tricks, and you'll work with your career coach on how to set that up. Or we have people who are actively interviewing as they enter career services, and we can skip right to the parts that talk about interview questions and prep and that. So you'll work with your career coach every week for 30 minutes a week. Some people choose to like put 2 sessions together, so they get 1 hour a week. Again, it's up to you and what you think you need in that week. And you'll start applying to jobs. In addition to our platform and the curriculum, there's another tool called Hunter. Hunter is a job seeker tool that is not a Designlab product. It's kind of adjacent. It helps you track your jobs. So you can like save jobs into Hunter, apply later. We can see what you're doing. So we can sort of, make sure you're on track. Your mentor can see what you're doing too. They can send you jobs to apply to that might make sense. So that kind of keeps you organized and keeps you like, on track for getting the job. And the other thing that you do in career services that we encourage you to do is to network. So that is reaching out to people on LinkedIn, reaching out to people on ADP list, talking to professional designers, developers, product managers about their careers, how they got there, and also attending like events that you can find through like Meetup or your local UX professional organizations. We ask that you do that at least one of those at least once a week. They can be remote, they can be in person. Again, everybody here is in person and is remote currently. And that's really like on the basics. Like that's about it. You kind of enter in career services and you just kind of keep going until you hopefully land a job or an internship or apprenticeship.
Cool. So in UXA and UX Academy, oftentimes students will, especially when they start, they're going to say like, or they're going to ask like, how do I approach my mentor sessions? Like, how do I approach this? What do I go with? So in the aspect of career services, like you mentioned, students are going to be paired with a career coach. What's like a sample agenda that a CS student should go into these coaching sessions with? Like, what do you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it will depend on your situation. So obviously, like the first thing that we say in any mentoring session or coaching session is like, they need to get to know you. So it's like, introduce yourself, talk a little about your background and your experience, because that becomes the most important thing when you're trying to land a job. That is one of the most important topics, is how do I translate what I did into what I want to do? You know, so if I used to be a teacher and I now want to be a UX designer, how do I talk about that? So really, like, the first few sessions are going to be about your story, and your story being, how do you talk about that experience? How do you put that on a resume? How do you put it on LinkedIn? So that will be kind of the start of your experience with your coach. You want to kind of like, you know, put yourself into, you know, starting to get into the interview process as fast as possible, where you're going to have to answer these questions.
What, I guess, like, in your view, is there a difference between a mentor and a career coach? And if yes, what are like the main differences?
That's a good question too. So the mentor is, you know, during the academy, the mentor is there to like advise you on how to do a lot of like technical tools too. So it's like technical skills that you're learning. The coach is more, I mean, it's a lot of interpersonal skills, and sort of advice. You know, and again, if you think about it, it's like the coach as somebody who is there to like champion you on and give you feedback and point you in different directions that they think you'll succeed in, as opposed to the mentor who's really teaching you something. The coach is, again, theoretically maybe teaching you how to do whiteboarding challenges, which is kind of a technical skill, but it is more about like coaching your personal talents and figuring out how to like convey those to, you know, the companies you're seeking jobs from.
So we get this question a lot for folks who are joining us in Foundations and UX Academy. You know, it's about mentors, right? Like, they want to know who they're going to get paired with. So I know in the aspect of career coaches, like, we have, our parameters are a little bit different. I'm not actually too sure what those are, but are we able to shed a little bit of light on how folks are paired with career coaches, or kind of like general things that we look for?
Yeah. So when you're in UX Academy or Foundations, to some degree, it doesn't really matter if your mentor is in your geography. You could be mentored by somebody who's in Australia if you live in LA. As long as they have the technical skills and the experience, like, that's great. You get introduced to people who are around the globe. When you are matched with a career coach, we take geography into account. We try and match you with someone who's closer to where you are or where you're job seeking, because they may have insights into processes, companies, like types of roles that, you know, something that you're applying to in LA would be very different than you're applying to a job in Hong Kong. And so we want to try and get you a mentor who could advise you on things like what's appropriate. You know, resumes look very different in different geographies too. So like, we'd want somebody to say like, these are best practices in this area, versus somebody who's just, you know, knows how to use Figma anywhere in the world.
So at the end of UXA, you know, a student graduates, right, with a portfolio that's been reviewed by our lovely review panel. And then when they get to career services, often a question that I get in the community is, does my portfolio need to be perfect in order to go to career services, or will career coaches help them with further refining that?
Yeah. So I think this is an important thing for, you know, people who are considering a design career, is to know that your portfolio is never done. Your portfolio will never be done. If this is the path you're going down, you're going to continually change that portfolio. You're going to add to it. You're going to improve old pieces of work. You're going to take them out entirely as you put in new pieces of work. So to graduate from UX Academy, like, we need you to show that you're proficient at everything we've you know, introduced for you. That doesn't mean you're perfect at everything. So when you do get out into the career services section, if there are things that you know, your coach recommends you do, they will tell you. You know, and for some people, it's like, all right, well, if you want a job in a digital agency, you're really going to have to play up your visual design work and your UI. So let's work on that. Let's change your portfolio. Let's rearrange some of your case studies. And that's time well spent. Like, that's what you should be doing along with applying to jobs. So you absolutely will still work on your portfolio. Again, like, career services lasts up to 6 months or so. If you go a few months and you're like, I'm not landing the jobs I wanted to, then you may need to change your work or your expression or something. That's perfectly fine.
All right. Another hot question that comes up is social media and your professional profile. Do you feel like it's necessary for one, like, especially for like a designer, to have a presence on social media? I guess like separate from LinkedIn, because I mean, I know LinkedIn is social media, but like, it's a very different form of social media.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, LinkedIn, like you absolutely need, you need to work on your LinkedIn. You need that up to date. That is a huge tool during your job search that like, doesn't matter if you don't use it ever again, definitely use it while you're searching for a job. So like LinkedIn is the most important. If you're going to have some other social media presence, the most important thing I think personally is that you keep it up to date. And so if you're going to say like, if you're going to have an Instagram account of your like personal artwork, keep adding to that. If you're going to say that you write Medium posts, don't just write one, write like multiple. Make sure it stays fresh and shows that like, if you're going to claim that you do a thing, do it well or do it consistently. Don't just say you do it and then never update it again.
That's great advice. We actually have a question that's kind of related, ish, but it's more portfolio related. So this one's from Emily. Is non-UX UI work helpful to keep on one's portfolio? I know that that's usually a burning question because we do have folks who were, another type of designer before joining us at UX Academy. So what's your feeling on that?
I think you can definitely keep it in. You should put in a separate tab or a separate like drop down. Make it so if you are applying to my UX design role, I can only see your UX work. If I so choose to go look at your other work, great. But don't confuse somebody by putting all the work that you have on one landing page. Because if I accidentally click on the wrong thing, I may reject you for what I see, like in one piece of work without seeing like what you really wanted me to see. Again, I would say keep it professional too. Like if you are a painter, if you were a painter before you switch into UX design and you actually sold paintings and did galleries and it's professional looking work, great. But if you did like flyers for somebody's like birthday party, maybe don't include that unless it looks like professional grade.
Yep, totally. Okay, so there is another question. So this one's quite interesting because I feel like there's probably different feelings about this, but this one's from Jessica. Should I use my legal name for my social media that will be related to my work, or can I use my preferred name?
I think you should use your preferred name, whatever you want people to call you. So again, if your name is Jessica and you go by Jessie, like use Jessie. If you are one of the ones that comes up sometimes, if you're getting married and changing your last name and you know you're going to be doing it, I would get your domain and your preferred last name and whatever that is, and don't have to like worry about switching it later.
What about like the use of your name versus like your brand? Because sometimes, right, like, folks kind of, they either want to associate or dissociate, like whichever one. Like, what's your feelings on that?
If you want to be an independent contractor, if you want to be a freelancer, a professional freelancer, and you already do work under like the name, like, I don't know, New York NYC designer, then keep it under NYC designer. You're going to look like your company. If you want to be hired by a company and be a staff designer, keep it your name. Like, that's just my perspective. What it will say to me if you are a company is that you want to be a contractor, not like a full-time staff person.
That totally makes sense. All right. So next one is from Jay. Hopefully I said your name right. If I'm able to land a UX-based position before the end of the program, am I still allowed to partake in career services in hopes of a better opportunity?
So for us very specifically, if you do land a job within like before you graduate, you would fill out the like I've been hired form, which is great. And you can get up to 4 sessions. So you would get 4 sessions with a career coach. This even happens if you're in career services and you do get a job after week 3 or 4 or 12 or whatever, and you want 4 more sessions, we'll give you 4 more sessions. So it kind of helps you get your feet under you as you start your career. But same thing, like if you do get a job while you're still in there, we can give you 4 more sessions with a coach who would be a new person to you.
I did not know that, so I just learned something new right now. Mo, you are after my heart right now. Mo wants to know, are there group crits for people in CS? And for those who are not part of our community, group crits are essentially just their discussion sessions, so that way students have the ability to kind of practice presenting their work and, in addition to getting feedback and giving feedback, all that fun stuff. But Mo's asking about the next stage here. What professional development?
Yeah, so when you're in career services, we have actually launched 2 meetups type things. So for all intents and purposes, for people who are in Designlab, like group crits for career services oriented topics. They are not exclusive to career services students. We let in, if you're still in phase 2 or you're waiting for a portfolio review, you can come. We're not going to keep you out of them. They're not required anymore like they are while you're in the UX Academy. Currently, the only way to find them is like through the events channel. Like I will post links because I'm the one that runs them. But this quarter, we're starting to roll out more sessions with different mentors. So mentors will start to lead more career service oriented group crits. So we can do it across different timelines, particularly geographies. Stay tuned for that. Like we're kind of overhauling some of our group crit functionality, and this will be part of it.
And if anyone who is about to enter career services or you're in UXA, whatever it is, if you have ideas or suggestions of the types of group crits you'd like to see for career services, like if it's, interview prep or portfolio, reviews, whatever it is, like send us your suggestions just because, we're only two people. Our brains are only so big and can only think of so much. So the more the merrier. All right. So this one's from Chase. How is freelance UX work handled in career services? Does this qualify as finding employment? That's a really good question. I don't actually know that.
So for us, if you land a job that is at least 20 hours a week for, I think it's like 4 or more weeks, that's considered like a role for us, because if you're a freelance designer, that can lead to either a full-time job or set you up for like a full-time job. So that's considered like a hire for us. Or if you land an internship, like a lot of people will, not a lot of people, but sometimes you'll do like a 3-month internship at a company. That's considered a hire for us. So technically you would like have 4 more weeks of career services. If you do something shorter than that, or you're not paid, you're not, if you're doing like a pro bono project or like you're doing a website for your relative or something, that's not considered a job for us. And by all means, like stay in career services and keep looking. We would absolutely encourage you to do those projects, but we wouldn't sort of tell you you're done in career services then.
All right, so this one is also on the topic of freelance, and this one is interesting because I know a few of us have different takes on it. A lot of times when a student in UXA is thinking about what does my job, what does my life look like with this new job, right? Sometimes folks have, an idea of like, I want to start only freelancing. I only want a full-time role, but we also know that there's all types of roles to consider, obviously pending your own personal situation. But this one's from Emma. I want to do freelance UX design. How should I approach my career services with that in mind? And then I guess in your perspective, Nicole, like, is that something that you, suggest for students to do? Like, think about that, or do you kind of suggest more of like the start broad approach and then figure it out as you go?
Yeah. So if you want a job as a freelancer, like a professional freelancer, you can certainly do that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great career path. I think you should just like read up and talk to people about what that entails versus getting a job at like a full-time company. If you're a freelancer, you are kind of always hustling for your next thing. You have to kind of market yourself and be confident in doing that. As a freelancer too, you may be in situations where there's nobody to mentor you. So if you're confident that like, hey, if I don't know it, I can figure it out. I'll Google it. I'll ask my friends. That's fine. Then like be a freelancer. If you don't want to do that though, a staff job or somewhere that has a team that you can sit down and is going to train you might be the better choice. But I would say it more depends on your background. If you come from like maybe like a marketing background and you were in, strategy or something, or production, you're used to projects and timelines, but now you want to be a designer within an agency, like great. Like you already have a lot of knowledge that would help that make that transition easier. So I think that matters more than like your background kind of comes into play there.
Interesting. Love that. Okay. This one's very, very upvoted. This one's by Anna. So other than LinkedIn and Indeed, what other sources can we use to look for work? The challenge I'm running into is that all UX UI designer jobs are looking for seniors or entry level of 3+ years of experience.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And what I tell everybody is just, you have to ignore the years of experience. So don't limit yourself because somebody says 3 years of experience. For a lot of you, you already have 3 years of work experience at least. And so that doesn't count for nothing. When they say 3 to 5, they've just arbitrarily picked a number. There's no requirement for UX designers. The only place where they might be a little bit more, serious about that number is if you're working for the government or you're working for some highly regulated industry where, yes, you might by law need 5 years of experience or something. But what you should do is more look at the role. Like, what are the requirements for the role? If you are confident that you can do 60% of what's in a job description, apply to it. Ignore the fact again that it says like 3 to 5 years experience. For a lot of people here, the only thing I'll say is like, if you see a senior UX job, maybe don't apply to that, because a lot of times that indicates that you'll be managing somebody, or that you should have a degree of knowledge about like the way the business works that you may not have as a person coming out of like a boot camp.
My goodness, I'm loving how active this chat is. You guys are amazing. So I guess just to build on to what Nicole just said before we jump into the next question, that is advice that my mentor gave me when I was in UXA. He basically said, ignore. He's like, even if it's a senior, he's like, apply. And sometimes the reason is, now being on the other side of it, sometimes companies don't actually know what they're looking for or who they're looking for. So it sounds a little safer for companies to hire someone who might be more senior, but there's also downsides to that too. The downside of very senior people is that sometimes you can be a little bit stuck in your ways. You can kind of, you may not have been so up to speed on like, new tools that have come out or new practices or whatever, new trends. So there is a downside to hiring someone who's senior. So it does depend. But like I said, there are a lot of companies who are just figuring out how UX fits into their organization and how it can provide any sort of benefit to them. So they don't even know. So like Nicole said, like, it's just a number. It's just something that they throw there because they're also doing their research. They're doing their research with other job posts, seeing what other people are posting, and they're just copy and pasting. That's it. Like, that's all they're doing. So truly, like, unless, maybe it says like an architect or principal designer, something that says 10 plus years, that one's probably where I'm like, okay, probably not. But I would say even roles that are listed as senior, just go for it. Because like I said, a lot of companies just don't know. All right, cool. All right, so next, oh my goodness, next question. From Drew, are there a growing number of remote-only UX job positions since COVID, or do you find that companies still want employees in the same city? Are junior designers expect to report to a job more than experienced designers? What's your, I guess, experience in this last 2 years?
Yeah. So obviously like last year is different than now. And then who knows what's going to happen in like 3 months or something. But like typically right now, it's a very hot job market. There are not enough employees for the jobs that people want. And so they're going to be a little bit more flexible. I would say like there is a trend towards saying that like it is remote, but in the future, we would prefer people to be in the office. So and again, this would all become a conversation if you do land the interview. You'd have to talk about like, what does that actually mean for that company? Right now, again, just to get people in the door, a lot of companies are saying remote is fine. But then it would be a conversation. Is remote fine forever versus is remote fine for 6 months and then you would want to see my face? A lot of more junior designers or mid-level designers, frankly, would want that face-to-face experience versus remote forever, or just this is what their design experience is. There is something to say for like having somebody immediately next to you or in the vicinity to like, I don't get this. Can you help me with this? Versus slacking somebody and figuring out who's around. So I think, again, kind of like the freelance question, it becomes more of like, are you comfortable with it? If you want a truly remote UX role, you can find one. Versus like, would it be nice to just see like what the office is like or what my coworkers are like and what that culture piece is if I was in an office?
Ooh, man, these are heavy questions. Holy moly. All right, this next one's from Haley. This one's going back to LinkedIn. I think this one's actually a really good question because there's a lot of debate around this. So what is the best way to show my design lab experience on my resume and LinkedIn? Would it be okay to add under experience as freelancing? What do you suggest?
So Designlab or a boot camp belongs under education or certification. It is not experience, because experience to a recruiter 90% of the time, 99% of the time, like I'm going to assume you mean you worked there as an employee. So don't put it under experience. I would say too, like we also have staff designers. So if you were saying you were a designer at Designlab, that's not true. We wouldn't be able to support that. Like if HR needed to call us and say like, did this person work here? We'd have to say no. So that could theoretically get you in trouble down the road. I would absolutely say keep it over in the education side of your resume, education parts of your LinkedIn.
Cool. All right. This one's from Rye. Going back to setting them up for success when they enter CS. Rye's asking, what's the one best thing they can do to set themselves up for success?
I'll give you a couple things. So there's no one thing, but get your resume in order. Even if you've never written a resume, get all your experience on a page. So like, because people don't update their resumes enough. And so it's probably going to be kind of a pain for you to be like, all right, what did I do? What did I do here? Like, so start getting that all in the same place. Same thing at the same time, like go on LinkedIn. Start looking at what does your LinkedIn account look like? If you've set it up and haven't touched it in like 3 years, go in, refresh it. Maybe the most important thing you could do though is start talking to people. Start talking to people who are designers, start talking to developers, start talking to product managers, start talking to your relatives who work at different companies. You're not asking them for a job. I think that that's an important clarification to make, because people are often like, I don't want to, reach out to somebody and hit them up for a job. They don't know me. You're just asking for a conversation. So it's the sort of like, I would love to know about your job search. If you see a designer who went through a boot camp, like tell me about what your experience was like landing that first job. That's all you want. You're not going to ask them for a job. You're not asking them to like look at your portfolio necessarily. It's just starting to hear what other people went through is really important.
Oh my gosh. There's so many of these that I could probably jump in and answer, but I'm trying to like pull out the CS specific ones before I jump into like mentor Emily, put on that hat. But oh my gosh. Okay, so this one is, you know what? Let's jump back into mentors. So can you tell us more about mentors? So, I mean, we talk a lot about like where our mentors come from, but our career coaches, we have slightly different like criteria for someone to be a career coach. Can we give them any information as to how we source our career coaches?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways. I mean, the recruiter career coaches, again, have like a different application process because they don't need to be designers. They need to be career recruiters who have hired for product design roles. And so there, we're really just trying to make sure that like they could help you with your resume and your LinkedIn and answering questions about like, why did this company do X? Like they'll understand those sort of things, or what sort of interview questions am I going to get? So like that hiring process is a little bit different. Like that's the qualification for that sort of person. For the career coach who has a design background, they will be able to help you if you need more resume help or if you need more portfolio help. So if you want to focus on like some portfolio pieces, then a designer, a career coach with a design background may be more important. They also, again, like theoretically have managed designers and hired designers. So then it becomes like they have more expertise on like what they might be looking for and can help you figure out like, how do you answer those tough questions? These are the questions that I would ask, or these are the questions that I ask the people that I hire, from that very personal experience versus a recruiter who's like, this is what I look for. The designer can say like, this is what I hire. So again, it's kind of like 2 sides of the same coin. I think the important thing to remember too, when you get to career services, like if you're not working with your coach or if you want to focus on something that your coach doesn't do, you can request a switch. So again, if you get to a certain point and you're like, actually, I think I really need to work on like X, we can try and like rematch you with somebody else who might be able to help you with that versus something else.
So this goes nicely into Dustin's question. Is it important to be assigned a CS coach that is in a specific industry that you're interested in?
We don't match by industry. We very specifically don't match by industry because we don't guarantee you a job in that industry. You can certainly say that like you're more or less interested in something, and we'll try and find somebody who has that. But we don't guarantee outcomes by industry. It's just by role. So it doesn't really, we don't like index on that very specifically.
So you just jumped right into the next one. And this one I know is a hot question. Are people who go through Designlab, UXA, and Career Services guaranteed a job?
We do have what we call our tuition reimbursement policy. It is not a job guarantee. So we don't say like, here's your job and there you go. If you have met a very rigorous set of criteria all the way through our program, if you've done everything in the order that we say you need to do it, and you get all the way through career services with no offer, and it's just not working for you, there is a tuition reimbursement policy. You would request that through our support team, and we do like an audit of a bunch of different things. But yes, like we will honor that if you have not been successful by doing everything that we've tried to make work for you.
Oh, this next one's also like a It probably depends. But this one's from Ethan. Let's say I secure a UX internship before graduating. Awesome. Does Designlab count that as a job? And if yes, does that put them in that bucket of like the limited number of sessions versus the full amount of sessions in CS?
It'll depend on the internship. So if it's an unpaid internship, no, that's a nice experience for you to have. If it's a 3-month or 6-month internship and it's paid, then yes, that's a hire for us. And you get 4 more sessions with like, a coach to just get you on your feet, and you can ask them questions about like, hey, how do I be successful in the design team? And like, what sort of things should I ask? And that sort of thing.
This next one may be a little bit hard for us to answer, and I also have a little bit of things to say about it, but it's a hot question. What percentage of our graduates get full-time permanent positions versus jumping into an internship or contract work to start? Like, what, we may not have the exact numbers, but do you feel like there's a trend?
No, we don't track that. I don't know what that is. I would say more people go into a full-time job because a lot of our students and graduates have past work experience. If you have absolutely no work experience and you're coming straight out of undergrad, or you didn't go to college, that may set you up better for an internship. And so that background tends to like move into like an internship first, versus somebody who's worked for 7 years as a teacher, that again, like they tend to go more into like full-time staff roles. But I don't have a breakdown of that.
My add-on has nothing to do with percentages and just things that are tracking. But, for folks who are, have the question of which one is better, there really is no better. There are a lot of factors that depend on what is good for you. So it could depend on where you live. It could depend on what industries are available where you live. So for example, I'm in San Diego and I jumped into UX design about 5 years ago. Design jobs here are few and far between. And folks here just don't leave San Diego. They just don't move. So folks are in their roles for a very long time. So for me, I had almost no choice but to consider a contract role. And honestly, that was the best decision that that I was kind of forced into, mainly because if you are someone who learns quickly by just jumping right in and just getting thrown into the fire, contract work is, to me, the way to go, because you don't have to go through a whole month's worth of onboarding and meeting a bunch of people that you may never talk to, whether it's virtual or in the office. So I would just say, don't discount any of the options. Just figure out what actually works for you. If you're unsure, explore all of them and then actually go from there. Don't make a decision based on what you think is going to be good, when in reality this other path could be just as good for you. That's it. That's my TED Talk for today. Sharon's asking, if I'm working during the program and graduate, but still want a new job in UX, will Career Services support me?
Yeah, sure. We definitely will. If you work through UX Academy with any job, first, kudos to you. It is harder if you have a full-time job and you go through our program. And if you want a different job after, yes, you go into Career Services. We don't count against you that you have a job.
And for what it's worth, we have a lot of folks who are in the program who work full-time while they're doing UXA full-time and part-time. So, and we totally understand that, you just have to, right? Life is life. You gotta make things work. All right. This one's a good one from John. Are there any resources you can recommend to help build and brush up on your UX vocabulary? So I have a quick answer for that. We put out a glossary on our page, so I will throw that link into the chat. But while I'm doing that, Nicole, are there any other resources that folks can look to so that way they aren't caught off guard during an interview?
I think again, there's some amount of this in the curriculum when you get there. And I don't want to, come off and sounding like I'm pushing you into just doing your own research. But honestly, if you Google a bunch of things like designer developer relationship, that's one that is very important for you to read up on, because one of the questions that you'll probably get is, how do designers and how have you worked with developers, or how would you work with a dev team? And if you've never done that, that's okay, that's fine. But you need to be able to answer, theoretically, this is what I would do. And you're only going to get there by either talking and networking with product designers and developers and all that, or reading about it. So you can go on YouTube and watch interviews, practice interviews between designers and developers. We have one somewhere in our blog, we did it too. Or reading what are the important parts of a design handoff. So just reading about process is something that, again, you can do it for free. and will better prepare you for that question when it comes up in an interview, even though you haven't done it.
Oh my gosh, I did not anticipate all these amazing questions. All right, so this one I can probably start to answer, and if you want to jump in. So should we learn more than one design tool? My answer is always going to be yes. Do you have to learn them all at once? No, you don't have to. I will very happily say that as someone who started UX design when Sketch was pretty much the only viable option out there, I only transitioned to Figma like last year and a half ago. And it was mainly because I'm stuck in my ways. And then eventually my students were like, I'm all in Figma, so I had to learn. And that was honestly the best. And the transition between a lot of the tools that are available today, the learning curve is very low. Like if you know one, it will be very easy for you to transition over. And some may consider this bad advice, but honestly, it was great advice for me, from my mentor. He basically told me that in an interview, if someone asks you if you know a certain tool and you've heard of it, but you've never used it, you just tell them yes, because likely they're not going to test you in that moment. And if you get hired, you probably have about a week or two lead time to figure it out, do all the Googling, test out the tool, do your free trial, all that fun stuff. So not just a design tool, but any tool that you could potentially work with, just learn it. Start a free trial. You're going to be bombarded with a bunch of emails. It's like, try this, but you won't know until you try what works for you. And then even better, when you walk into a company, let's say you're a solo designer and they have zero clue as to what you need to do to be successful, like what tools you need, you can tell them, like you make that driving decision and kind of dictate your own tool set. So honestly, the more you know, the better.
I absolutely agree with that. I would say, like, again, obviously Figma or Sketch, those are the ones we require you to know. I'm not a designer myself, so I don't really have an opinion on what is better. I will say I think that people use Figma more. I've noticed that more on resumes. I've noticed that more, like the companies I've worked at have asked for Figma first. But if somebody knows Sketch, again, you can pick up Figma pretty quickly. If you're going to learn anything else, like Adobe Creative Suite, like that's the other one that like you'll probably have to learn eventually, or will become important in your job, like Illustrator, or something like that. The other tools that, like, again, are design tools that people might want to pick up are things like video editing, or any sort of like video capability. And it's not that it's required, but if it's between you and another person for the same role, and that person has 4 other programs they know, they may go with the other person because they're just bringing more to the table. If you have like a background in any other design related thing, and you know some weird software tool or something, also put that on your resume. So we had a student who used to work in like architecture and building and knew Revit. And then, we had a role that like one of the requirements or preferences was somebody who knew Revit. It's like this one person was the person who had both the things they wanted, and they hired them. So, if you do have like an obscure background in something that could put you at an advantage over someone else, like absolutely own that.
However, we'll add a caveat to that, or kind of like something to just keep in the back of your head. Be careful about how much a job role is also asking for, right? So on the flip side, Nicole said, right, we're both saying like it's great to learn all the tools, but also be very wary of a job asking you to do the job of 3 people, because that can happen, right? So with video editing, video producing, that could very well be its own role. So if the UX job is asking you to do other things that really doesn't fall in the realm of UX, get clarification during that interview process, or ask the recruiter, like, just for more information about what is expected, because, you could very well be put in a position where you're expected to do 2 full-time roles in one role. And that is, I know, something, especially in the UX industry, we're trying to have people break away from, right? Like the UI designer and developer. Oh, you have to learn UI design, plus you also have to learn how to develop in HTML. I know that's a hot question, completely up to you if you want to learn how to code, but for the most part, we're very much like active in terms of like, let's not combine the roles. Let's actually let people do the jobs that they're meant to do. That's it.
Yeah, I will say, again, this is like very timely. I just spoke with a student who had put on their About Me page that they knew HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And when they say they knew it, they only meant that they had like read about it. And so they were getting recruiting calls saying like, oh, so you're a UI engineer or you're a UI developer. And they're like, I'm not this. Why do they think this? It's because of what they said. They didn't mean to imply that, but that is what a recruiter will assume. That's what a hiring manager will assume. So again, if you know some sort of coding, great, wonderful. But just be careful of how you portray it if you don't know enough to actually like code your own website.
All right, so this one from Holly goes back to what we talked about earlier about just apply for the job and just see what happens. So Holly's saying, you mentioned it, we can do 60% of the job, you know, apply for it. If we're hired for said job, how do we approach the learning curve for the 40%? I know your answer, my answer is going to be the same. First answer is Google, right? And that's exactly what Holly put. But like, what else other than Google can someone do to kind of like fake it till you make it? Because, right, when we talk about imposter syndrome a lot and just like you can know all the things, but still feel like you never know all the things. So how does one kind of get over that 40%?
I'll answer the question more from like a how do I get the job perspective, and then you can probably like once you're on the job like figure it out. But so one of the things that often comes up is like these questions around like, have you ever done this thing? And so for a lot of bootcamp grads or newer designers, they haven't done that thing. Like you've done, you know, bootcamp brief projects that we've given you, and you've done it, you've done the work, but it's not been quote unquote like a real project where you've had a client or you've had a team do it with you. But so if the question is like, have you ever worked with a developer? You could say no. Like that's a legitimate answer. Like, no, I haven't. What you could also do though, and this is kind of like bridging that gap, is like, no, I haven't had the opportunity to work with a developer yet, but I do understand that if this were a real project, this is how the handoff would go. Or I haven't had the opportunity to work with a developer yet, but I have worked in cross-functional teams when I was a producer working with my content team to produce like a video for this thing. And so you're pivoting, like you're saying that like, no, I haven't done it. So you're not lying, but you're saying I have done these other things that I understand would be very similar. And I understand that like the value of this question is how have I worked in a team, not literally have I ever worked with a developer.
All right, this one, I don't know if you get this question a lot. Do you have to come from a graphic design background or any type of design background to become a UX designer?
You don't. I will say, like, I'm again being very honest, it might make it easier, especially at the beginning, to pick up some of the tools because they're very similar. But if you've not been a designer, it does not matter for us. We don't necessarily see that like people who have a background in design are that much more successful than people who were a teacher or you know, worked in sales or something. Again, it might help with the fundamentals of like design, you know, so if you already know those, great, then you kind of skipping over some of the steps, but you will all kind of end up similarly meeting in the middle at some point of like getting into the more of the details of UX.
I am someone who didn't come from a design background. I came from retail and support, if that resonates with anyone here. And I will 1000% say that your soft skills, if you're like really good with customer support, whatever it is, right? Talking with people is different than like actually interacting with people. But if you just generally enjoy like problem solving, you enjoy, you know, figuring things out because you just want people to just have what they need, right? Similar to like if you were assessing what you need, soft skills go a long way in this industry. Like in almost any industry that I've been in, learning a tool is learning a tool. Anyone can learn a tool, but it is very hard it takes a lot of work to like kind of fine tune your soft skills. Mainly because, you know, a lot of it is tied to your own personality and a lot of it is a lot of practice. So it's not perfect from the get-go, but I will say like, yeah, like to what Nicole said, if you come from a different industry that has a lot of soft skill intersection, you're probably going to be a much stronger candidate because your passion, at least in interviews from my experience, passion is what got me a lot of my jobs, and it had nothing to do with my portfolio, had nothing to do with the tools. Was it nice that I had a portfolio? Yes. Was it nice that I knew how to like use design tools? Yes. But at least in my position, most of them just cared that like I had a general passion for the job. So if you are entering this industry brand new, no experience, like don't feel like your past experience doesn't matter. It absolutely does matter. Ooh, okay. All right. We're wrapping up here. We have another like 13 minutes of questions. Holy moly. Woo. I don't know. Any of them jump out at you, Nicole?
I see a couple of questions related to like past experience and how does that translate into, you know, if I want a design career. And I will say that could be something that's very valuable to you. So if you worked in finance or banking and wanted to work in fintech as a designer, you have a lot of industry knowledge and insider knowledge about how things work in terminology that make you a stronger candidate than maybe somebody who does not have any of that. So if you're, again, like, Healthcare is another one. If you're coming out of healthcare, there's a lot of like regulation that goes into that if you then translated, switched into design, there's tons of companies that hire designers in the healthcare space. So it could be like, I would say like, don't discount your background, kind of like Emily was saying, like own where you came from. And, as long as you can translate like, okay, well, this is where I was doing, and this is how I'm putting these pieces together. And now I'm here. Like that goes a long way to helping hiring managers figure out like, okay, well, this person's really dedicated to this, loves healthcare, but now they just want to be in this other aspect of it. Great.
I love this one mainly because I'm personally very anti-cover letter. My mentor was too, so it was probably his fault. But this one's from Lenore. Will a career service mentor help someone who has 10 plus years of experience in other fields write a cover letter that is tailored to UX design? Like, what kind of support do we offer in terms of like cover letters?
Everybody has to write a cover letter. Now, I will say that the cover letter is not going to land you a job 99% of the time, but you should absolutely do it. A cover letter is as short as you can make it, because again, most of the time nobody's going to read it. But in the scenario of you and another person and somebody wrote a cover letter saying, I really want this job for these reasons, they may go with other person. So you do want to set yourself up for success in as many avenues as possible, cover letter being one of them. But I will say, like with cover letters, like write a generic one that you can basically just change out the role and the company name. And for, again, 90% of your applications, that's fine. If you really want a job at Spotify, write them a custom cover letter. But again, don't think that anybody's going to read it. Don't put all your hopes on like, I wrote this awesome cover letter. It's going to come down to your work, first and foremost.
My mentor was the hiring manager, so that's a big reason why he was just like, I can't. He's like, if someone sends me a cover letter that's more than 4 sentences long, I don't look at it. Like I don't look at their application. He's like, I don't have time to. That's not to say you should all listen to what he says, like, use your best judgment. But I think a follow-up question to this, and there's so many takes on cover letters, like what's your advice for how to approach it? Because, oftentimes we hear like, don't put what's in your resume in your cover letter, but then I'm sure a lot of us are kind of like, feel awkward turtle about writing about ourselves in a cover letter. Like, well, my experience should speak for itself. So like, what's your advice?
Yeah. So, I mean, cover letters, you want 3 paragraphs. Again, this is like my take on a cover letter. You want 3 paragraphs. Paragraph number 1 is like, hi, my name is X. I'm applying to your role at X company. That's it. Like you're just stating, this is what I'm doing. Paragraph number 2 is the one where you can get a little bit more like, I started my career in teaching. I really loved, customizing my lessons for the user. I discovered product design. And now I found your role at X company. I think I'd be a great fit for 3 reasons. Done. And then the 3rd paragraph is like, thanks so much for your time. Hopefully we can have a conversation. If you think I'm a good fit, goodbye. Like, so you're really, the 1st and 2nd are just throwaway, or the 1st and the 3rd. And the middle is like very succinctly 3 reasons why you think you might be a fit for their role. That's it. Like, and you don't have to, don't get fancy with it. Like, don't be like, don't go out of your way again, unless you have some really compelling reason why you are a very interesting candidate for that position.
I know we don't track any of this, but I guess, do you see any trends between graduates who land jobs who end up either in-house or at agencies?
I think it's just personal preference. So I think that like, the more you know about agency versus in-house, that matters more about where people end up. So if you're working in a design agency or an advertising agency, there's pros and cons. The pace can be a lot faster. You'll probably work on a lot more different projects because you have different clients. So you may work on like Doritos and then work on JP Morgan and then work on Uber. Like there's a bunch of different clients and projects. So you're going to just be put on whatever comes in the door. So the variety is nice. You get to work on a lot of different stuff. You have to learn about a lot of new things quickly. The downside is like the hours can be longer because you're client driven. So if somebody says on Friday, I don't like this, somebody's got to work the weekend to make that change. And it might be you. But like agencies in general, they're wildly creative. Like it's fun, again, like they're there for like the creativity of the fact. In-house, like the pros of working on in-house is like, again, theoretically, they could be larger teams and your role is better. Your role is pretty defined. There's probably people there to support you and like help you with whatever questions you have. the projects will be a lot more like long-term too. So if you really like figuring out, did this actually work, you'll have time to like do more testing and to look at outcomes and then like reiterate on things if it doesn't work or if you want to do something different. The downside again is you could be working on the same thing for like 6 months or a year. So if you work at Uber, you're working on everything that's Uber, you're not working on anything else. So some people find that a little bit like boring after a while. But I don't know how many of our students go one way or the other. I think it would have to be more like, do you want to work at an agency versus do you want to work in-house?
I'm chuckling a little bit at Rye's comment in the chat, mainly because Rye sounds like me. It sounds like agency work may suit people who like to jump from things to things and like to be busy all the time. But it's a double-edged sword because I've done both. And the downside of it is that because you are so anxiety driven, like you have just all of that on you all the time, that can probably make it worse. So that is the flip side of it.
Yeah, I've recruited for both, and people will like them for different reasons. I mean, again, the agency typically is like very fast paced. It's wildly fun. You work a lot with the people that you hang out with. They become like your friends and family. And you have to want that though. If you don't want that, then that's not for you. Maybe don't go down that path.
All right, we're gonna do 2 more questions because these are, I really like these questions. So the first one is, how do we support folks who are graduates of UX Academy who are not currently based in the United States, but they're looking to find employment in the States? How do we support that?
So the first thing we'll say is that we do recommend that you are legally allowed to work in the country that you want to get a job. It will be very hard for you to find a job in the States if you are not legally able to work in the United States. We wouldn't tell you not to do it. We're just going to say it's going to be a harder path. So that is number one. Like if you want to work in the United States and you're not authorized, that could be difficult. And it's not based on like anything personal. It's just competition. So if you are based in, I don't know, like Denmark and you want to work here, you're going to be competing against 500 applicants who already work here for the same job. So that's going to be difficult. We will support you though. We'll set you up with a career coach and we'll try and help you with that. If you want something that's like that opposite of where you are, it's all about the networking. So your best shot is to establish relationships with people who are at the companies you want to work at. Again, it's going to make your search easier. It may take a lot longer, but that would be, again, like the most useful thing I could tell you.
So we addressed a lot of folks here who, probably already have past job experience, but what about in the scenario where, we do have students who come through right out of college? So they may not have a lot of work experience. How do we support them, right? Because like we talked about, prepping your resume, all that stuff, like what's our approach or maybe like tips or advice for someone who is looking to transition into UX, but, went to college for something different and they're fresh out of college?
Yeah. So those are the ones very uniquely that like are typically more qualified for internships. Even for the fact that you just came out of school, because a lot of internships will say you had to have graduated recently or been like a boot camp grad. And so internships might be the place to look for you. But above and beyond that, like you have to emphasize your internship experience or your coursework experience. And so it is going to be, again, like theoretically, it might be a little bit more difficult because of the competition you're facing. But it's going to be about crafting your story about like why you did this, especially now, frankly, during the past couple of years of the pandemic. There's a lot of people that are kind of in the same boat. It's like if you graduated in 2020, like that's tough. And to some degree, it was tough for everybody around the globe. So there's a degree of, all right, I get it. Like there were no jobs. So you decided to move into UX Academy and you're going to have to really emphasize the experience of the capstones you worked on and the projects that you worked on. I will say, try and get volunteer work or volunteer projects where you are at least working with somebody else. So you have something to say if they're like, how do you work in a team? But it's really just about like telling your story. And again, your story is going to be different than somebody who has worked for 20 years and is doing career switch now.
Okay, I'm going to do one last one, then we're done. This one's from Mariah, and this one, so Mariah is almost done with phase 1 in UX Academy. So she's asking, what about competencies to ensure that you're ready for a job? So she's almost done with phase 1, reached out to, about an opportunity that was posted but they mentioned that they didn't have enough experience in Figma. So like, how do I ensure that I'm designing in Figma at the level that UX professionals are expecting?
That's like an interesting question. I think it's less about like, well, I mean, honestly, if you're still in phase one, there's probably still stuff to learn. So it's not bad to take the interview. By all means, like talk to somebody. If they want to talk to you, take the interview. If you don't want that job, take the interview. But I will say, like, focus on your craft, because you're going to be hired for your portfolio. If it's a designer role, they're going to want you to design. And so you do want to make sure that like you've graduated, and we have, again, like kind of told you like, hey, we are confident you can go out in the world and be a designer. If you're still in phase one, so you might not be there yet. Even if you can do like the basics in Figma, there's probably a lot more to learn about like how to put that all together that you haven't touched yet.
Yep, totally. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up, but I guess before we do, Nicole, are there any other resources or just things other than Google, because that's our famous answer? Are there other resources that you recommend that anyone who is looking to transition, they're on job hunt, whatever it is, like anything that you recommend that they look into?
ADP List. So go talk to people on ADP List. ADP List is like a community of designers who are volunteering their time for free, and it's global. So go talk to the person who works at the company you want to work for. Go talk to another designer and just say like, how'd you get a job? Like straight out of school or whatever. That's a resource for you to like learn more about the design community and the design world. And maybe you're going to connect with somebody who in 6 months is going to say, hey, I have a job. So networking and talking to people, I know it is outside of most people's comfort zone. A lot of people are very uncomfortable, like cold calling people or saying like, hey, will you talk to me? But I think you need to put it in the perspective of you're doing this for a very limited amount of time. You're doing it to find a job. And this is just one of the steps of finding a job, is talking to people. So it's not like you have to keep doing this for the rest of your life, or it's going to take you 4 years. It's a very set time where it's like you need to really work at understanding where you're going and what that looks like and how you get there. And the only way you're going to do that is like by talking to people. So that's what I'd say. Like, go talk to people.
And yeah, it is hard. And even the most, social or extroverted type, or that we think are people, right? Like, it may just be just as hard for them. So it's really hard for anyone. No one likes the idea of networking, but we do have to do it. We're doing it right now. Everyone just did it in the chat. So it just starts with something as simple as sharing your LinkedIn link. But cool. Thank you everyone so much for being here. Thanks, Nicole, for an amazing session. I learned a lot. Hopefully everyone here did. This is recorded in case, you missed any part of it, you want to rewatch, you want to share with people, all that fun stuff. I know a few of you had some questions in the questions tab about more like operations and logistics around what you get within career services. I recommend writing to our admissions team, admissions@designlab.com. They can help with those responses. They can help get you your answers and give you a little bit more insight. So yeah, they're very nice people, promise. But awesome. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Thank you again for joining us. Like I said, this is recorded. You'll get an email about it. This will also be on YouTube. Share this with your friends, who are maybe are considering not just Designlab, but a bootcamp in general. I'm sure there are a lot of tidbits here that can get folks quite a long way. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Nicole. Talk to y'all soon. Bye.